Hello everybody. I was on the live stream yesterday with my good friend Shane, and we had some interesting comments by the viewers that were watching and leaving their ideas. I even had John. He actually came and he watched the live stream, so it was always nice to have a friend that actually is watching you as you actually do a live stream. But I have to say this is it's Shane's channel, so I didn't really talk that much. I sort of because I realise it's more for Shane and how he puts himself across on his live stream, and I think he did a fantastic job. So John's here. He brought his camera down from London and he's filming me, and we're going to try and do some editing, because on the other videos we didn't do any editing at all. It was just one takes, and with the last video I did, the sun sort of was coming in from the window and it kind of obscured my face a little bit, and I'm happy with the video because my mate Shane filmed it, but we just thought that these little details might make my YouTube channel a little bit better, and we're going to introduce editing into my videos. So this is just a sort of a trial run. We're just trying out the camera, and then John will take it away and he might polish it up and do some editing, or we might do some retakes. So I've got another stack here now. Tick mentioned he wants more content, so I think, well, if he wants more content, I'll give him more content. And then there was another YouTuber whose name I can't recall, and he said, can you do less book reviews? The book, I don't do so much book reviews. What I do, I use these books as a sort of a prompt. They're just an idea of what I'm going to say before I actually say it. So if I'm holding up a book, I'm talking about something, but that doesn't mean to say I've read every word from the book. It's just a prompt. So one of the first things I'm holding up here is a book by David Irving. Yeah, he's a very controversial historian from World War II. So it's The Secret Diaries of Adolf Hitler's Doctor. Now the reason why I'm holding up this book is because this is a diary by Theodore Morell. On one of the YouTube presentations that I'd like to do is of the beginning of Hitler's career as he started in the Nazi Party, or helped create the Nazi Party, and when the last days in the bunker when he was very, very ill, and he sent Theodore Morell away, and he must have gone through some kind of withdrawal, cold turkey is a term that you might call it, where he must have been in such severe pain because his other doctor wouldn't know what Morell was giving Hitler in those last days. So when he was contemplating suicide, I don't think he had a doubt in his mind because he was in such pain. So this is one of the books that I'll be referring to when I talk exclusively on Hitler's health. Now I might be jumping about a bit, but I think it's all relevant and everything is connected. I was watching something on the Shah of Iran. Now you might be wondering, why is the Shah of Iran relevant to Berlin? And one of the reasons is because it was the trigger that started the Baader-Meinhof gang. Now this is Ulrike Meinhof when she was actually captured, and it's called Hitler's Children. And when the Shah actually went to Berlin in, I think it was 1967, he had a lot of his henchmen with him, sort of like personal bodyguards, and they were literally beating up the crowd with sticks, and the police just stood by and watched, and they didn't do anything. And then eventually the crowd turned into a riot, and unfortunately one of the protesters or bystanders or witnesses was killed, and he was killed by a policeman, and that was the trigger to the Baader-Meinhof gang. That protest in 1967 was the beginning of the Baader-Meinhof gang. There were 3 generations of the Baader-Meinhof gang, and the Baader-Meinhof gang actually ended in 1998. So I'd like to be able to talk a little bit more on the Baader-Meinhof gang. I'm going to do a lot more research on the Baader-Meinhof gang because it's so relevant to Berlin history. Here's another one. Erich Honecker. Erich Honecker was the leader after Walter Ulbricht. Walter Ulbricht was the dictator of East Berlin. He instigated the Berlin Wall. He went to Moscow insisting, to Khrushchev that we need to build a wall because so many people were leaving Berlin through the U-Bahn or the S-Bahn because that was like a gateway to the west. It was like the one place that they could get out. And I mean, they had roadblocks, they had police patrolling, and they would send anybody back, or if they suspected that anybody was trying to get away in the west, they would then, might take them to the police station or something. But at some point, they would have to let them go. But they just couldn't patrol everything. They were unable to patrol everything. So what they did was there was many opportunities for those that saw the writing on the wall that could actually see that they were going to close the border of Berlin at some point. So they would make the opportunity or make haste while the going was good. Erich Honecker actually started to build the Berlin Wall. He was responsible for it. So when Walter Ulbricht was forced from office, Erich Honecker came into power. Now I believe that was the beginning of the end of the Berlin Wall. I really believe that. I don't think it was in the 80s. I think it started when Erich Honecker came into power. And it's very difficult to actually find books on these and biographies, and if they are written, they're mostly written in German. This one is written in English, so it's actually good for me to be able to read through this because it means I can read through this and understand what's being written as opposed to German, where I'm really going to have to, I really would struggle and it would take a lot longer to get through the book. But anyway, Erich Honecker. As a result of the building of the Berlin Wall, they had the Stasi. So here's one. This was the untold story of East German secret police, and here's another one. The Stasi files, East Germany's secret operations against Britain. Now I haven't read this book yet. I haven't had the chance to read it. But the Stasi were the most feared secret police in East Germany. Everybody feared the Stasi. The whole country was under surveillance. There were files on nearly every person in East Germany, as it was at the time. They were surveilling everybody. There were spies everywhere, and it was noticed for its kind of snitch culture. It was, even neighbours and even family neighbours would grass on each other. I mean, it was tragic. And that's the power of the Stasi. And they had file and file after file, which they weren't able to completely destroy at the end of the East German regime when it collapsed. And therefore, people that suspected that they were being surveyed would have access to the files. So there was a lot of people, even the Brixmas people, that these were those that were in the British Army that were allowed to go into East Berlin and East Germany to actually have a look around, and film things. But there was this battle between those with Brixmas and the Stasi, so it was a very, very cat and mouse battle between the two of them. So it's a massive subject. I mean, look at this book. I mean, and this one, it's astonishing. There's so much to get through, but because it's my channel and because this is the stuff that I'm interested in, this is the stuff that I'll be reviewing. Okay, the next book here I've got is Willy Brandt. Willy Brandt was the Chancellor of Germany in the early 70s, and he was a very popular figure because there was a lot a lot of Germans that were ex-Nazis, and they, because I think there was a shortage of politicians, doctors, lawyers, engineers and so on, that they had to hire ex-Nazis, but it was something that they didn't want to advertise, they didn't want to tell anybody, so they kept it quiet as far as determined. And it really was to try and help rebuild Germany, because as those that are well aware, Germany was split in two. You had East Germany, West Germany, and you had Berlin, which was split between East Berlin and West Berlin, but also you had Bonn. And this is my point, as Willy Brandt was the Chancellor, he was very popular. However, he was forced to resign because there was a leak, meaning that he was being spied on by one of the members of his inner circle. And this isn't unusual. There was a lot of Germans that were actually spies on the behalf of the East German government, so they were actually helping the Stasi. The Stasi were the secret police, modelled on the KGB, but then they were able to get to a point where they were exceedingly good at what they did, and like I said, they surveyed everybody, and I mean there wasn't a file. I mean, there literally was a file on nearly everybody in the East German state. And why do we know this? Because a lot of those files survived. They weren't all computerized, they were put on paper, because Erich Mielke, who was the head of the Stasi, feared that he might be hacked. I mean, that's a modern term, but they might actually get into the files that way through the computer, and I suppose he had a point. But yeah, Willy Brandt, a very important part of German and Berlin history. Now the spying which was going on, now I mentioned this before, but this is, like I said, I've got two books here. One's called Betrayal in Berlin, George Blake, The Berlin Tunnel of the Greatest Conspiracy of the Cold War, and I've got another one, Spies Beneath Berlin. So here, I love that. If I've got a picture of the cover of a book, that kind of tells the story in and of itself, just the picture. And you can actually see here the tunnel that was made and that was dug from East Berlin into West Berlin. Now I spoke about this in my other video, but I didn't have a book to show or a picture, but here you can clearly see it. And I'd like to get into the story because I think this is a fascinating one. And if you ever go to Berlin, you must go to the Cold War Museum, and you'll actually see part of the tunnel that they actually created in the mid-50s. Very important part of Berlin history. So that's that one. This is the latest one that I've got. This is Britain and the Berlin Crisis 1961. And this is, I mean, this is bought new. And what's so fascinating about it, you can actually read the messages that's sent backwards and forwards, the day before, on the day after, and so on. To get stuff like this, and for the British government to actually release it, that's why I bought it. I mean, I didn't hesitate. I thought, yeah, I've got to get this. And you've got a picture there of a guy in the Royal Green Jackets. I mean, I don't even like this helmet, and he's actually got the helmet strap on, to actually hold it in place. And he's got an SLR, and I noticed that the SLR, it was stock, and the butt is out of wood. And when I was in the army, it was out of plastic. So you can actually see how old this weapon is. But when I left the army in '88, they actually were starting to withdraw the SLR, and they brought in the SA-80, and I remember how complicated, finicky it was. It was all these bits, and you needed like a penny piece, to be able to take it apart. And I mean, I never liked it, and they had problems in the first Gulf War. It's certainly worth mentioning because I used the SLR. We jumped with the SLR, and if that actually went through mud and gunk and swamp and sand, it would still fire. It is an excellent weapon. Maybe slightly on the heavy side, but highly reliable. But anyway, this is Britain and the Berlin crisis, and it's all the communique between the those who are in the politicians in office at the time. Just being in work to meet a whole load of people, because, and especially my being ex-army, because I got a jacket. I have my parachute regiment badge there on my jacket, and as a result of having that badge, I get lots of people approaching me, either ex-army or army or Marines, paras, and they all come up to me as a result of that badge. And one of the guys that came up to me was somebody who was who lives in Germany. He's ex-army, and he's stayed in Germany, and this is a book about the British Army of the Rhine. Now, he said he wasn't in the British Army of the Rhine, but he mentioned saying, yeah, he was in the army at the time in Germany, but it wasn't part of the British Army of the Rhine. But this is the only book that I have of the British Army of the Rhine, and I think they withdrew in 2018 because I think the British government makes so many cuts. They make the British Army smaller and smaller and smaller, that it's almost to the point where it's almost inconsequential. But with this book, it actually goes into the history of what the British Army of the Rhine was actually like. Again, this is a book that I bought. It's an ex library loan book, and it's a withdrawn library book, but certainly a book that's well worth reading. Let's see, and I've got a couple of books here. The Tagebuch der Versuchung 1942 bis 1950 and Nie mehr nach Hause. And what this is about prisoners of war, German prisoners of war that were sent to the gulags in Russia, and they served. Some of them were lucky; they went home like in the late 40s, but the last remaining ones were like 1955, 1956, and they would be sent from the gulags, or those that survived were sent from the gulags to Eastern Germany. From Eastern Germany, they were then made their way into Western Germany. It's part of German history that's not often spoken about. Most of the books that have been written about are in German; they're not written in English. So we don't get to see how they suffered and how they survived when they were working in the gulags. I know I watched a film about one of the stories is about a guy who actually did escape, and it's called "So weit die Füße tragen," which means as long as my feet can carry me. When he spoke about his escape, and he escaped from, I think it certainly was Eastern Siberia, that's it. It was Siberia, and he made his way into Persia, which is now Iran. So to actually see a film about it, and let alone have books written about those that actually were in the gulags, is quite something. So yeah, in one of my episodes or one of my YouTube presentations, I will be going a lot more detail. And I think this will be the last book I'll talk about. Hugh Thomas, Hess, A Tale of Two Murders. Now, I've got another book by Hugh Thomas, but this one, I always will say that one of the great mysteries is whether Hess actually committed suicide in Spandau. Some say he did, some say he didn't, and there's a lot of confusion. I mentioned Tony Letizia. Tony Letizia was the Governor General at Spandau at the time of his alleged suicide. You know, he's a 93-year-old man who's got arthritis. You know, how was it possible that he could actually do it? But we will never know. And but I do know this, that the governments lie, and governments like to keep secrets. And if they want to get rid of someone, they're quite capable of doing it. So the Russians wanted Hess to stay in the Spandau prison for longer. The Allies wanted to release him, and there was a bit of backwards and forwards and a lot of politics going into it. So I mean, it's very, very easy to actually, you know, take out a 93-year-old man who's clearly, you know, on his last legs anyway, and for that they tore down Spandau just after his death. I mean, literally to the last brick. And now they built, I think, a NAFI store. It might have been a NAFI store, and they called it Hessco. Hessco is Hess and then Tesco, so they called it Hessco. And that so if you ever go to Berlin, to Spandau, you won't be able to see anything. You just go to the location of where Spandau Prison used to be. Held about 600 people, but they converted Spandau, and it held 7, and they had a rotation between each country. So the Soviets, the Americans, the British, and the French, and each month they would change the guard. So each country would have an opportunity to guard the prisoners that were imprisoned in Spandau. So that concludes my presentation. I'm so pleased that I've got John here with his camera testing it out, and he's going to do some magic editing to it, and so I'm ever so grateful for him to take the time to actually try his camera on me, and to try and appease Stick, because he's forever asking for new material. Auf Wiedersehen.